welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell. Hi, Rose.
Hello, Christine. How are you?
Here we are, middle of April. How are things going for you in this pandemic this week?
Yeah, this is the first week I've felt a little wonky. Today was a rough day. Today is the first day I've really cried. And I think, we've mentioned this before. Up until now, I almost felt an odd sense. I'm sure people listening will be like, what? An odd sense of relief, because I've felt like we were heading towards something for so long. And when this happened, obviously I didn't think it was going to be a pandemic, but because of our work with climate, I was so attuned to the non-sustainability of, is that the right word? Non-sustainable, unsustainable way that we've been living, that I expected something, but obviously not the pandemic. Anyway, so the first couple of weeks I was
kind of in a happy place, as I recall.
Well, yeah, I felt like I had a relief valve. It was like, whoosh, the pressure had been building for so long. But this week, today's day 4 of week 4 for me, because I started on a Monday, so week 4, and today the grief just kind of welled up inside me, and this is the first day I've been able to cry. So,
and it may be your grief about the things that you're missing about being back home, but also the collective grief that you may be tuning into.
Yeah, it feels like, certainly I'm in California still. I'm planning on going back east. I'm planning on going back east at May 4th. And I'm missing my partner, and I'm missing my house and my dog and my hands in the soil. And everybody's talking about gardening. And I'm like, gardening is cathartic for me. But I think as an empath, it feels like the collective grief. It's, people are marginalized. People are worried about their income and how much longer can this go on, and how are they going to feed their kids, and how are they going to pay their rent. I think there were some articles about 30% of people weren't able to pay their rent this month. And in the States, the first week was 3 million, last week was 7 million. They're expecting another 7 million this week of new unemployment applications. So the collective grief is huge.
Indeed.
I think. How about you? How are you doing?
Well, I do feel like both personally and collectively, I'm a little bit more insulated than you are. In Canada, we have more of a social safety net. We have Medicare, and so nobody who loses their job, which there definitely are a lot of people that's happening to, don't lose their health care at this critical time. And also our government, I have to say, our federal government has been very proactive, and people are already getting checks deposited into their bank accounts for the support. And I hear it's up to $2,000 a month. I don't know all of the details. We do have at least one family member who's looking at getting that compensation because he's not able to work the way he was. And it sounds like the process is pretty simple, but there still is a lot of uncertainty up here as well. And people are, it's not an easy time. It's never easy to stay inside for days and weeks on end, even if you can go out for a walk once in a while. But of course, domestic violence is up. The numbers are up here, probably in your country as well. And so there are women and children who aren't safe in their own homes. And that is something
Yeah.
that,
That adds to the grief.
yes, this will be exacerbating. So yeah, but like you, I just wonder, where is this going to end? And I guess I would add too, as you know, because I just did this energy healing training, which finished last week. I've been quite immersed in that. And that is a lot about tuning it at an energetic level. I've been working with people to release a lot of trauma at an energetic level, an ancestral trauma. So for me, it feels like this is especially the time for me to be doing that work, because, and I've said this before, I'm sure, on this podcast, if we weren't collectively traumatized as a species, we wouldn't be committing collective suicide. So,
oh my God, that hits me.
Yeah. And so for me to do this work now, I'm quite preoccupied with it, and it feels like my calling even more. It's just kind of honed my focus, and I don't know if it's a coincidence. You and I may not believe in coincidences as much as some other people would. Is it a coincidence that I did it just at the beginning of this time of paradigm shift? I do believe that if we're going to shift the paradigm before we smack up splat against that wall that we've been heading towards, of using up the resources of, depending which country, 3 or 4 or 5 planets, unsustainably, if we are going to have a paradigm shift that will shift us into a place where we can, as humanity, thrive and other species can thrive, this is it. This is it. So I hear your pain, or I can understand the grief, but I also, as we've talked about before, that's what you were tuning into before. This is it. This is our chance. And you know what? I have to tell you, Rose, I haven't mentioned this before, but I woke up this weekend and I had this dream, and I'm probably gonna tear up. Sorry, folks. I woke up probably at 3 or 4 in the morning from this dream where the parched earth was coming back to life and greening up. And there were animals that were dying, like were skeletal. I remember an elephant, for whatever reason, that was just next to death's door. And they were reviving and coming back into the peak of health. I had this dream, and I believe that it was actually a vision, that this is the possibility that the earth can heal, and that this pandemic gives us the opportunity like none other. We always have a choice. There's free will on this planet, and we have to, each of us, take steps towards that healing, whatever it is. My path is becoming clearer, like I said, with this soul detective work that I'm doing. But it is possible. That's what I feel like that dream told me.
Yeah, so that's a perfect segue into our question for today.
Right.
Which is, will the coronavirus lead to a global change of heart? And I think that's why I felt such relief. For me personally, I mean, that's why I had been feeling such relief, because it was like, okay, we need to change our ways. I think we all collectively know that. This is our opportunity. And yet, as we're in week 4, day 4, I'm still seeing so much human ego and so much blame and shame and finger pointing that it's like, okay, really? I mean, we've got to get to the point where we're united in order for the healing to happen.
I don't think we've seen the worst of it, at least not in your country yet.
I don't either. And that's it. And the more we go down this path of ego, the more we're, I think we talked about this in a previous podcast. I mean, transformation happens when you surrender, when you're on your knees and you're like, okay, I'm not in control. This is something bigger. What is it teaching me? What's the lesson in this? And for a lot of people, we're not there yet.
I think there's a possibility we'll be, collectively. Unfortunately, a lot of it's going to be really, really difficult for a lot of people personally. And,
And
we've said this before, we don't want to belittle that, but we literally are on a suicide course.
Right.
So that doesn't end well. That doesn't bring life. So are we going to talk about what Pope Francis has to say?
Yeah, well, so
just preface that with, I am not Catholic. I always say the Catholics burnt my ancestors at the stake for being a Baptist. But I do love Pope Francis. And you, Rose, how would you describe yourself?
Well, yes, I would say I'm a recovering Catholic. So I was, my dad went to both my parents went to parochial school. My father went to a Jesuit college. My father taught at a Jesuit Jesuit preparatory school for many years. But the dogma, I mean, I think I'm not alone in being kind of foisted away from the church in terms of, birth control, abortion, obviously the whole pedophilia thing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's happened that a lot of Catholics have kind of moved away. That being said, this new Pope Francis, is really a man of the people, and it's pretty interesting to me. So much so that when I read there's an article that Christine and I are going to be talking about, was published in the Tablet, and we'll provide a link on our Earthfields page.
But the Tablet is a Catholic
publication.
publication.
It's a news, a Catholic weekly news. I'm assuming it's in print as well as digital, but it's digital. I mean,
okay.
It's digital.
And I do want to say about Pope Francis, because we've talked about Laudato Si before, which was his 2016 encyclical, which is Care for Our Common Home, I believe that is. So he clearly, in the footsteps of, he took Francis of Assisi's name when he became Pope. So, care for the animals, the creatures that share the world with us. But he seems to be very atypical Pope.
Well, he has taken the church from its very conservative roots. Benedict, who was the priest, who was the Pope before him, was very staunch and really a lot of Catholics left because he wasn't willing to move with the times. He felt like the church had to hold its own, and anything that the church did that moved away from its roots was a compromise. So he held fast to the roots and lost a lot of Catholics because of it. And Francis was much more liberal. Is much more liberal in his viewpoints.
He comes from South America, which is where liberation theology comes from.
He's Argentinian, yeah.
So we're not going to talk about liberation theology, but
that's right, because you have a degree in theology.
Yeah, religious studies.
Oh, religious studies. Okay.
But yes, but liberation theology, which started in South America, among the poor, it's all about how God is there for the poorest among us. God is not a God of the powerful. God is a God for the poor. And if you're going to be true to the gospel, so we'll put a link if anybody wants to read a little bit more about liberation theology. But those are definitely Pope Francis's roots. So it's interesting. But let's switch to the article which you were starting to talk about in the
Tablet, and it's a and it's out of the UK actually. And this one reporter wrote 5 different questions to Pope Francis and asking him to give his take on how he was experiencing the pandemic and how it affected him spiritually and whatever. So there's 5 different questions. So when it's an interview, it was a written interview. He provided the questions to Francis and Pope Francis, and Pope Francis gave him his written answers. And it was all done in Spanish and translated because Pope Francis speaks Spanish, and so it was done in Spanish and then translated into English by this reporter. But it's such a rich interview in terms of some of the quotes that I took away from Francis about this time. And this was my favorite. This is the time to take the decisive step, to move from using and misusing nature to contemplating it. Can we sit there and know see the truth in that? To me, that's what spiritual, I mean, he's a spiritual leader of 1.3 billion people on the planet. That's like a fifth of the planet. So to hear someone speaking, to hear a leader, a spiritual leader, a leader in general, when we're all looking for some kind of leadership, to say these kinds of words, he's going to reach a lot of people. And I think that changes a lot of people's hearts.
So what else did he say about this time?
So I've got like 3 or 4 different quotes I can go through.
My understanding, having read it yesterday, is that he like you said, this is a time, I think the title of the article, this could be a time of conversion.
Right. He's talking about spiritual conversion or
yes.
Change. Yeah. Spiritual conversion.
Changing our hearts.
Meaning, we're moving. So one of the other things he says, we've been living in a world of money. In the world of finance, it seemed normal to sacrifice people, to practice the politics of the throwaway from the beginning to the end of life. And he's talking about homeless. He's talking about the homeless people who are throwaways. And just recently there was an article, as this pandemic is going on in the States, that in Las Vegas, they have this huge, I don't know if we discussed this on the previous podcast or not, but it really just, the visual of it just gnaws at me.
I don't think so.
In Las Vegas, they took a giant parking lot and they taped it out and they're having the homeless sleep in a parking lot. Well, they have literally thousands, probably tens of thousands of empty hotel rooms. But they're not moving them into hotel rooms. They're making them sleep outside in a parking lot. And at first they were like, oh, well, we can put carpeting beneath them. But then they realized that they couldn't put carpeting beneath them because they couldn't keep the carpeting clean. So a hotel room can be empty, but a homeless person isn't worthy of taking that hotel room. So it's just this whole idea of
the value of a human life and dignity.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. And this is normal. This is business as normal. I have a sense of outrage today that is just I'm not a happy person today. And then he goes on to say, we are realizing that all of our thinking, like it or not, has been shaped around the economy.
Yeah.
And he calls for this to be a time of reinvention, for creativity.
I remember a quote from David Suzuki, of course, a great Canadian environmentalist and scientist, talking about how the economy in our day and age is sort of the equivalent to what dragons were in an earlier age, which basically is you have to be afraid of it. You have to kind of you can't take on a dragon. Like a dragon frightens people. And there's this myth that the economy, that we should worship the economy and we had to have such reverence and awe for the economy that was in other times given to dragons who would terrify people. And here we're terrified if something happens to the economy, and the economy, it's so powerful. And it's like, so he talked about, we need some dragon slayers. We need some modern day dragon slayers. So maybe the coronavirus is what was it, St. George who slayed the dragon? Maybe the coronavirus will slay the tyranny of the economic dragon.
And yes, it's that would be an amazing thing if that could happen. I think there's an opportunity to every challenge. So can we see the opportunity in this? And can we turn the ship, and can we turn it fast enough? I think my grief today is brought on that, in seeing the shaming and blaming that's going on still, and seeing that I'm starting to see people say we need to get back to the world that we came from. And I don't see how that's possible.
That ain't happening, folks.
I just don't see how it's happening. It has created a lot of heartache for a lot of people, and we need to be able to support those people.
And I guess
it's interesting to see that, the lowly quote unquote workers, the mail carriers, the grocery clerks, your barista, the food servers, all those people that we deemed, as Francis says, that they were kind of throwaway people. We're not going to pay you $15 an hour. You're going to have to work 3 or 4 jobs to be able to support your family. All those people are keeping the economy going. All those people are helping us survive. It's not the billionaires. It's not the CEOs sitting behind in their gated communities, sitting behind or they're renting their yachts or, whatever. It's not them that are keeping it going. And so many of them are balking. They're laying off their people. They don't. So yeah, we've got a ways to go. It seems like if this is to cause humanity's ego to be in check.
Well, and again, so humanity, I mean, you can't accuse the people, your barista or, the housekeepers at the hospital. So it's the paradigm we've been born into, and it needs to die or we will. And this virus is showing how rotten at the very, very core this paradigm is, really.
Yep. Yeah.
And so like nothing else could have, which does feel like maybe the universe has her backs.
So here's another quote. He says, Pope Francis, there is an expression in Spanish, God always forgives. We forgive sometimes, but nature never forgives. We did not respond to the partial catastrophes. Who now speaks of the fires in Australia or remembers that 18 months ago, a boat could cross the North Pole because the glaciers had all melted? Who now speaks of floods? I don't know if these are the revenge of nature, but they are certainly nature's responses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how I think. That's my belief system. It's, it's nice to see a man of the cloth, the leader of this, probably the spiritual leader of the world. I was looking at, also I looked at, I wanted to see if the Dalai Lama had said anything. Nothing as strong as this. Will people listening to him who had not thought about nature in that way, will their hearts be opened?
And if it was just him speaking, but it's everything else too. And it's all those people in Australia who have been impacted by the fires. And now it's all those people who have lost their homes from landslides and fires in California and in various places in South America. So it's there may be an opening that we just can't predict. So here we are. And so, yes, we talk about climate change, but we have been talking about the coronavirus a lot in the last weeks because that's what is on everybody's mind. So
Right. And we're seeing how the coronavirus is affecting the world from an environmental standpoint.
Mhm. So, in the midst of this, do we have any good news?
Which brings us to good news. This is another perfect segue. The Himalayan mountains have there's all these photographs everywhere of the Himalayan mountains that are seen clear and pristine for the first time in like 30 years.
From a distance, yeah.
From a distance. It's just, and they're breathtaking.
Yes.
Breathtaking. The air is clearer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 7 million people die a year. The statistic is 7 million people die a year from air pollution. Well,
Wow.
air pollution's way down. Traffic is way down.
There are blessings
Mm-hmm.
in this global pause. It's as I saw somebody call this, if we have eyes to see and ears to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So, do we have an action tip? I think we talked about, again, it has to do more with the coronavirus than climate change, but it also has to do with caring for others. And this truly is an act of love, I believe, when you put on a homemade face mask. Do not use a medical mask. Those are for the frontline medical workers.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this whole movement for masks for all, which is about when I wear a mask, when I'm out in public, I'm not going out willy-nilly, but all of us need groceries at some point. I may need some toilet paper in the next week, so I will have to go out. But if I wear a face mask, I'm protecting you, whoever is in the grocery store with me. And if you wear a face mask, you are protecting me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an act of love and caring to wear a face mask when you go out in public. Maintain social distancing, stay at home as much as possible, but make a very simple face mask. You can make it from a t-shirt. Where I am right now for the duration of the next few months, I don't have a sewing machine or even a needle and thread. So I'm going to be making mine out of an old sheet, I think, which I'm going to cut up make ties, and I also turned my sleeping mask upside down and stuck a very large table napkin underneath that. And it looked like I was going to rob a bank, but
there are all kinds of really
very creative.
Yeah, I saw this guy yesterday, or saw a photo yesterday. I'll see if I can find it. I'll put it up on the page. Those plastic sheet protectors that you slide, when you report into. Well, they have like 3 holes to
right.
clip into a loose leaf
right.
notebook. If you put a pair of glasses through that, you can wear this plastic.
Oh, hard to breathe through plastic, though.
Well,
Didn't
no,
you have
but
to tell you not to put a plastic bag over your head?
But it's not soft plastic. Sorry, it hangs out. It's almost like a I don't know how to say it. I'll show you the picture of it.
Because they are using face shields like that in the front lines for healthcare workers. Because
so it looks like a shield. It looks like a face shield.
Okay, so you're going to post that. I'm going to post a video from a researcher from University of San Francisco who made a video about what the evidence is to wear just a cotton double cotton face mask when you're out and about, and he does a very cute job of doing a craft demo. As he says, this is probably the one and only craft video he will ever make in his life. But so we'll post that.
Another silver lining.
Exactly. So share any ideas that you have with us on our Facebook page, or connect with us on Twitter. And we have to also have a sanity tip, which I'm going to share a graphic that originates from Jennifer Yeager, and who I believe is a licensed psychologist. And she writes, as a trauma therapist, I think there are a few things that are helpful to know. And she says, first of all, to acknowledge that living through this pandemic is a trauma. That's what we're all experiencing at some level, some of us more than others. So parts of our brain have shut down in order for us to survive. The next point is, as a result, we are not able to fully process a lot of what is going on around us. Feeling somewhat numb and out of touch with our emotions is normal, especially if you have lived through trauma before. Well, some people are also more apt to feel hypervigilant or anxious, while others become hypoactive or depressed. Neither means anything other than indicating your predisposition to dealing with extreme stress. In-depth processing of trauma happens years later when we feel emotionally safe to deal with it. And her last point is, when in the midst of trauma, just getting by emotionally and functionally is okay. Lowering expectations and being kind to yourself and others is vital. So no, you don't have to learn a new language or lose 20 pounds or
even exercise every day.
Yeah, just be kind, be gentle with yourself and with those around you.
That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me.